Welcome to the All Things Real Estate Podcast with our very own Josh Barker. With more than 20 years of experience and over 5,000 properties sold, Josh brings a unique perspective to the real estate market. Let's get started.
Josh.
Spock.
Darn it. I was going to try. I'm just going to go into it. Well, it's May.
Okay.
April showers is definitely bringing May flowers.
It's definitely happening.
Redding is gorgeous right now.
It is. It's awesome.
I was driving the boys to school. I get the opportunity every morning to drive my boys to school, and it's a great drive. And we were just talking about how like everything's green, everything's lush.
Yeah.
The weather's perfect. It's not too hot. It's the Goldilocks. Just right in the middle.
It's all good. Yeah, we got another month of this.
Yeah, so maybe if we're lucky,
yeah,
you know what I mean? Yeah. But and the boys also brought that up. They were also talking about, it's going to get hot real soon. They have a good memory.
Just a couple months.
Yeah, but, I was, the market update that you did this month,
yeah,
I mean, the numbers just keep rolling.
Yeah.
Right? Like everything, all arrows are green. The only arrow that's red is kind of interest rates, as usual.
Yeah, I mean, that's the only stiff headwind you have. But I mean, the numbers, and it's two things. The real estate market is going well locally. I would say that the real estate market is beginning to shore up nationally. The stock market is doing well, as most people know, in spite of even recent events. So it just tells you that this market has truly got some good components to it. The fact patterns look good. Interest rates are probably, the only drag, if you will, on the economy. But, everybody would probably agree, with a few exceptions, that those are still coming down. So,
is it in June when the Feds, because they do it like every quarter, they say do something?
They just met here earlier this month,
okay.
at the end of last month, and they didn't do anything, they didn't change anything. And then they'll do it again 60 days from now.
60 days. Okay.
Yeah. The new chair that's going to be elected, I'm sure, for the Federal Reserve by the end of the month. And what people don't understand is that just because you have a new chair for the Fed, that doesn't necessarily mean that, all of a sudden policy is going to change overnight by any means. Because the way it actually works is that that's one of many votes. I think it's 12 total.
Yeah.
That person clearly has some influence, but it's not going to be able to just change everything.
There's like regional feds. There's the main person, but there's a bunch of
there's about 12 total, and one of those being the chair. And then what they do is essentially, go into conference together and have discussions. And in some cases, they talk with the public to get some feedback from the economy itself, and then go back into discussions and then make a decision. And the chair has some influence, I think, on the greater group, but certainly it's a consensus. It's not just one person.
Yeah. And all the numbers, you alluded to a few of the numbers there with the stock market and stuff. The numbers they're not in a place where they're just going to lower rates.
Right.
They're also not in a place where they're going to increase rates. They're like,
right.
Inflation seems a little bit under control. So
yeah.
To me, the takeaway is that interest rates are probably going to stay steady. They're going to fluctuate very mildly for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, we might get, lucky and see rates for 30-year fixed mortgages, which is what most people listening to this or watching this are going to listen to. We might get lucky and see rates below 6% by the end of the year again. Cost of fuel is going to likely come down. I've heard some reports saying they're seeing as low as $60 to $70 a barrel. So by the end of the year. So, that's pretty optimistic that things will come to a conclusion overseas, and the economies across the world will start to stabilize as a result, and with actually maybe even a more stable area over there where all of those things are happening.
So the big things are locally is the new construction, because we're talking about new inventory coming to market.
Yeah.
As we've said before, DR Horton and Palomar builders are the two major builders.
Yep.
There's smaller contractors that might be doing homes here and there.
Sure.
But when you talk about full-blown subdivisions, those are the only two active right now.
Oh yeah, for sure. At any volume. You have a development over off of Court Hill Road that's getting ready to kick off maybe in the summer, but we'll have to wait to see, when they decide to ultimately pull the trigger on that in terms of building homes. And then the price point, I would imagine, where it's tucked away at, they're probably going to be targeting a very niche market versus DR Horton and Palomar are trying to reach as many and broaden out that market as much as they can.
When you say niche, are you talking about higher market?
Yeah, higher end market. Yeah, I think I don't want to pigeonhole it because anybody could change their strategy, if you will. But my best understanding of that right now is that they're going to be going over a niche product, a little bit higher end, which makes sense. I mean, they don't want to compete against Palomar and DR Horton right now. So, you got to fill the space where you can.
You told me that you've brought it up a few times that DR Horton has, I don't know if they slowed down or they said, hey, we're not going to do these next phases. Is that still, where are they?
Well, right now, I know it's kind of seems like it's been teeter-tottering, but my best guess right now is that it looks like they're going to try to fulfill all of their commitments that they have over in Shastina Ranch, which is over off of Rancho Road, off of Shasta View, the southern end. I think there's about 35 to 40 home sites left for them. And then they're out of land there. So we know they're coming to a conclusion there. And then they have a handful left over in Salt Creek with no intentions at this point that I'm aware of to acquire or to do any additional development. So I think they're going to finish off the east side of Redding here probably by end of summer. And then I think that they'll be winding down the balance over in Salt Creek, which is West Redding, by the end of the year.
Do you know how many units they're supposed to do in Salt Creek?
I'd be guessing, okay. But if I had to give a wild guess, I would just say it's probably under 25.
So, because I was thinking about what you said, inventory wise, it's pretty steady. It was just a little over 800, I think.
What's that?
The inventory for homes for sale?
Yeah, so we got about mid 800s right now, same as last year. The sales volume right now is turning year to date about the same as it did last year. And this is Redding for you. I mean, it's pretty much, our population doesn't grow very much. It doesn't go down very much. And so sales activity continues to stay fairly normalized.
Yeah,
that's what we're seeing. And remember, for most people, if you're around here, you already know this. But if you're looking at our area as a destination, most purchases here are not discretionary; they're primary home purchases. So we don't have a huge fluctuation in demand one way or the other because most people buy because they need a place to live.
Yeah.
Little different than other communities where you might have a secondary home market or an investor market, things like that.
So all those secondary homeowners in New York that are about to get punished with taxes, you could purchase a second home in Shasta County. You know what I mean? So maybe we'll get a huge flux of Manhattan money.
Yeah, you might, but I think most of those folks are moving south.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so our inventory is staying steady. Like you said, our absorption rate is 4 months, which means if no new homes come to market at current sales volume, you'd be depleted in 4 months.
Yeah.
That's a neutral to the low end of neutral, meaning if it goes a little bit less than that, we're going to start entering a seller's market, where there's so little inventory, they have a little more leverage. But right now
we're nicely settled into what's called a normal market. So 0 to 3 months seller's market. And we've been at the tail end of a seller's market for a long time. Right? So really just us moving into what we call the neutral market at a 4-month supply, it doesn't feel like much of a difference. 4 to 5 months is neutral. Anything 6 months or more supply of homes for sales tends to be more of a buyer's market. And where it really shows up is just in the overall psychology of the market. So, when you're in a seller's market, sellers feel like they have advantage over the buyer. The buyer feels a little defeated, and the conversations around the market going crazy and prices going up and all those things, right? Neutral market, you don't hear a lot. It's just kind of it's not a real hot topic one way or the other, so you just don't hear about it as much. And then, of course, if it's 6 months or more, then it's a pretty negative conversation. You have homeowners that are concerned about prices falling, buyers that are concerned about purchasing because they think they might get a better deal later. So that's just the general psychology of the market. And then if you layer in a little bit more, you could say, well, it depends on price point too.
Yeah.
I've watched some sales in the upper end here recently where I was like, wow, I saw buyer demand spike, let's say right around $1 million recently.
Well, I entered the market, Josh.
What's that?
I said I entered the market.
You entered the market. That's right. And part of the reason why, there's just a scarcity of a product there too. So, something comes to market, it sells fairly quickly. And we've seen that a few times with our office this last month. And I was like, wow, that's, something that we didn't see last year per se. So it's
are those local buyers, or do we have people like coming in from out of the area? $1 million is a lot of money locally.
Yeah, it's actually very interesting. Yeah. The ones that we've seen it's about 50-50.
Okay.
Where in years past it was like 75% out of market. So the
Well, you
fact
got
that
people selling condos in the Bay Area for
That's right.
1.8 million.
Yeah.
So I mean, they have huge purchasing power.
Yep. So we've seen that change though, where now it's about 50-50 local versus out of the area. I mean, our advertising and marketing that we do a heavy amount here locally that most people would see, but we do equally as much, if not more, up and down the state and across the U.S. So we're really, really pushing and leaning into trying to find those buyers that we can bring into the market that have a higher propensity to purchase at higher prices.
You know, one thing I was thinking about was these pending numbers keep climbing. The last few months, the pending numbers are like boom, boom, boom.
Mm-hmm.
But are they closing numbers?
Ooh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So no, we're watching the fallout rate here in the county start to climb. You know, it caught me off guard because with our company, you know, I always watch our internal fallout rate, and that's something as an owner of a company, I'm always thinking about how do we keep that number as low as we can, right? I mean, there's some reasons for things to fall out, and there's other reasons that are in your control, and there's other things that are not. For people listening, basically, you know, imagine if 10 things go into escrow, you know, they sell, they're in contract, you're in escrow. Let's say historically, it's been about 2.5 of those would fall out of escrow for a number of reasons. It could be inspections, which is the number one reason. It could be appraisal, which is a very distant number two. And then that final one that's very small is that, you know, buyer loses job or, you know, death in the family or something like that. It happens. For most part, it's always been around 25%. And internally in our office, that's the number we're targeting for. And we're trying to always push it down to 20, right? See if we can stay below the average trend. So I'm always looking at that, and I wasn't paying attention to what was happening in the county right now because our number was okay. And then when I looked and saw the number of pendings on the market versus how many were falling out, it jumped into the mid 30% range for failure. And I thought, well, that's interesting. It snuck up on me last month. I didn't see it until later. And what I think it is, and I would not go as far as to say that I've confirmed this, but I think what it is a couple things. One is it might be lack of training of the agent. So if you have a lot of new agents in the business and when they run into an issue, then they don't know how to solve it. And when I shared before that a lot of people are using quote unquote transaction coordinators, which are unlicensed people working remotely from home who are facilitating the transaction for the benefit of the agent, which by the way, we don't do. Ours are licensed in the building, supervised by my wife, the CEO of our office, to make sure that everything's being ran well. But I think when you have that decoupling, I think it could cause the fallout rate to go up. The second thing I saw was that the absorption rate's going up. So if you see the absorption rate at 4%, or I'm sorry, at 4 months supply, it's a neutral market. From a buyer's perspective, they see options, right? If they go into inspections with their home they're buying and they're not happy with what the outcome is looking like, and they can see other homes that they might be interested in purchasing because they're available, that might cause a fallout rate to increase too. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%.
So those are the two things I've looked at, and I've went, okay, so for us, we know what we need to do a great job in negotiations, do a great job of communicating well with all clients to make sure we keep things together when we can, and also be aware, though, that with that absorption rate growing, it could also have an effect on consumers.
Yeah. So when you say that it had gone up to in the mid 30s, is that just like over the last couple of months, the last year? Like, is this just something that just started happening, or like
the absorption rate?
No, you said that the fallout rate.
Oh, yes.
Is this just recent? Is this like maybe spring? Everybody got crazy and then they couldn't close, or?
Great question. Yeah. So it feels like it's more recent this year. And again, I can't put my finger on what it is. I can't tell.
Because they don't report. They don't say like, I fell out because I couldn't get the loan, or I don't want to fix the water heater.
Yeah, you're right.
You just know it just falls out.
Well, and here's the difference. Like, you know, back in the day when, you know, let's just say if I rewind 7-8 years ago, if I had a major issue with fallout rate in our office, I would have gotten on the phone with a broker of like Coldwell Banker CNC when Steve Kraft was running over there. Mm-hmm. And I would literally call and be like, hey, talk to me a little bit about what's happening over with your office, right? Mm-hmm. And trying to understand what their challenges might be. Because if his situations were mirroring our situation in terms of fallout rate, well, then that would tell me that there really wasn't anything really related to our office. It was just more of what a function of the market at that moment, right?
Yeah.
And maybe there's some strategic things that could be done to reduce it, but it wasn't, I wasn't as concerned. Now, had I made that phone call and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about, we're doing fine, then I would have known it was something wrong with us. Now, because there's so many people working for what's called a cloud-based brokers, right? There's no supervisor to talk to. There's no broker really to talk to get an understanding for what's happening on this macro level, right? So now you're really trying to just figure it out. Where before we used to have networking of talking to each other, understanding, the dynamics of the market. Can't do it right now. It's hard.
Yeah, that's funny. I think in real estate, there's always this. My experience with real estate is there's always this like competitive nature between real estate offices where they're kind of like they're your opponent. You know what I mean? Versus like, no, they're just, it's somebody you could collaborate with.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's what you're talking about. Like maybe some of the offices, they just don't communicate the way they used to. Like you would just call Steve Kraft and say, hey, Steve, let's talk. And Steve would probably not lie to you. He'd tell you the truth.
Oh, yeah. Well, I wasn't a threat to Steve. I mean, their office was crushing ours. I mean, they were huge, right? So Coldwell Banker at the time was doing exceptionally well. We've kind of stepped into that number one position in the market now, but that's only because of how fragmented it's become. We're still the same company really that we were, 7-8 years ago in terms of what we do, how we do it. Our volumes are very similar. So we haven't changed all that much. It's just the industry around us has. So before there used to be a handful of really strong brokers throughout the community here that were leading their companies and the agents were showing up and, there was a leadership structure in place. Now all these agents are, not all of them, but most agents are in what we call silos. So they're in that little tiny silo working from home with no real organizational structure in the community anyway for them to pull from.
No feedback loop.
There's no feedback loop. And it makes it hard for me as an owner of a company where, we're locally owned and operated. And typically I was able to reach out and collaborate with other people, not to like violate any antitrust things or anything, but just understanding, our economy here and how to help people better. There's nobody to talk to. The broker for most of these cloud-based people isn't in town. They live in another state or they're down in, another area of California.
Yeah. No, that is big. And that's a lot of industries. I mean, look at like what's happened to our big box stores or local retailers and everything going to like Amazon. I think it's similar. The outcome is different, but the idea that more and more keeps getting pushed into this virtual space across the board. I mean, I just, on a side note, my cousin is a nurse in Alaska. And she started a company a few years ago where they do telehealth.
Okay.
And they're booming. And it was, now granted, Alaska has a lot of really remote areas.
Yeah.
And so getting people to the hospital or getting to people was logistically very challenging.
Telehealth is the answer.
And so that's where she lives. She lives in Alaska. And so obviously that makes a lot of sense. But that's something you couldn't do 20 years ago, and now you can.
Yeah.
I mean, you just see stuff like that. And so I think like that's one of the byproducts of this virtual brokerage thing is you just, without this centralized system, it seems like quality feedback loops, a few things just kind of fall through the cracks.
Well, I mean, I'm always trying to just keep the number one thing, right? So for us, it's simple. It's just our customers locally.
Yeah.
All of our decision making starts there, and the decision tree, they're at the top, and then we just work our way down from there. And I mean, I would say that that's a very small-minded way to think, and I don't mean that in a
or focused.
Well, yeah, it's focused, but I mean, like if I was to sit on a stage with the owners of these larger cloud-based brokerages and they said, well, we've grown 2,000%, we put 15,000 agents in our ecosystem in the last 30 days. And I said, I'm really excited. I developed one of our agents this month to do a better job for his client, right?
Yeah.
The conversation is totally different. But we're focused on solving local problems and really focused on serving locally at a higher level. Where I think they're trying to solve for a whole national solution, right? It's just it's a different process, and I wouldn't say one's better than the other. Just we're not looking at being national. We just want to be really great locally.
So some of the other things that I caught on your market update was that commercial was actually doing pretty good. Retail wasn't, but you were talking about was it not grade A? What's the commercial A versus commercial B?
Yeah, A class, B class.
What is A class and B class? And
so I mean, A class would be, imagine a brand new building that's just recently built with the quality being something similar to a high level professional environment, right? That would be A class. B class would be a more dated version of that, or where it was economically designed in a way where it didn't really meet that high tier to start with, would be B class. And so what I was saying earlier this month in that update was that In the commercial space, especially for general office, it's extremely strong, provided that it's in good quality condition. Where there's vacancy is that if it hasn't been developed or improved yet, or if it's, kind of getting dated in its appearance and it needs to be refitted, that's where you'll start to see the vacancy on those tick up. But anything that's refreshed is leased, with very few exceptions. And then on the retail side, which most people understand this, on the retail side, it's totally different. I mean, you've got vacancy throughout a lot of the strip malls throughout the county.
Yeah.
And that's because there just isn't a lot of people that want to pursue that endeavor at the level there used to be because of e-commerce and things like that. So I think that that's going to continue to be the trend. And the question will be, how do we repurpose some of those units for the potential of being used in a different way? Like, I'll give you an example. You've probably heard us talking about the medical school.
Yes.
For Shasta County. And full disclosure, I'm a board of trustee member at Simpson University. So when I speak about this, I make sure you know that that's the case. And Simpson is pursuing the medical school here locally. At least at this point, that's the direction we're going. One of the things that, it's important is to figure out how to solve for our desire to bring doctors to the community, but also when you're doing something like this, you have an opportunity to maybe remove some of that space from the market. And like, how do you do that in a way that'd be more complementary? Like, we're trying to make a decision between building something which adds space or acquiring something that's existing and repurposing it so that it actually takes down the vacancy rate a little bit. Does that make sense?
100%.
And beautifies the area. It takes something, maybe, I wouldn't say go as far as blight, but maybe something that potentially could have turned blight, right?
Yeah.
And then have it turn into something that's a little bit more meaningful for the community. And so when we're approaching those decisions, it's trying to figure out how to repurpose a space in a way that makes sense for everybody. And I think that's what we might start to see across a lot of different spaces around the county, not just for us, but just in general.
I wish the best of luck. That sounds great to me to have like a medical school here to be putting out medical professionals. I mean, Redding's got a really good medical community. It's the hub, pretty much anything north of Sacramento.
Yeah.
I know Red Bluff has a little bit of stuff, but they are even kind of like a branch of the Redding medical.
Yeah.
And that's a huge component. I think whenever anybody decides to live somewhere, their access to medical is top of the list. Definitely, if you're, my age, if you're in your 50s or older, medical suddenly becomes important. 22, not so much.
Yeah.
But definitely, yeah. So that just sounds like that would be a great asset to the local area.
Oh, it'd be huge. I mean, what we're looking at on this, I hope we don't digress too far, but if you have the potential for 600 medical students attending a medical school in Redding, California every single year, so classes of 150 times 4 classes, 600, right? That is going to be a huge attribute to our community. And a lot of those doctors will be taking positions throughout the North State, of course, including Redding and Shasta County. So I do think that, a 10-year window, things look pretty darn good if we can figure this out. But, and I think there's a lot of momentum behind it. It's a big, it's a big direction to go, but
huge.
I was at an open house the other night for our kids, and one of the guys was sharing with me that he says, we don't want to make Redding mediocre, so we need big ideas, right?
Yeah.
And this is a big one. And for those who are typically used to just doing mediocre, we want Redding to change into something a little better than mediocre.
I can't remember if it was Plato. I think it was Plato that talked about this idea that you are always in a state of either growth or decline.
Yes.
There is no. Like, if you think that keep the course steady, what you don't realize is the rest of society or health, life is moving. So you're actually, you're either up or going down.
That's right.
And that, I get it. There are builders and there are maintainers. Mm-hmm. And builders build stuff.
Yep.
And maintainers maintain stuff. And oftentimes, maintainers get intimidated by building. And, we're going through, I think we're going to go through some challenging times in the next few years. I spend a lot of time working with AI, have really gone down the rabbit hole. And I started off, this, with a little bit of a dystopian, and then it's given way to, I don't want to say utopian, but it's given way to like, hey, look, this is a train that you're not stopping.
Yeah.
This train is not going to derail.
That's right.
So getting on board, trying to figure out how to harness it, how it can help me personally. Like I'm getting my kids very, very deeply into it. They're going to school for different degrees, but I'm saying, hey, you need to embrace this and implement it with the thing that you're doing. There's a saying in this AI space that I'm in is that, AI is not going to take your job. A human using AI is going to take your job.
Right.
And so I think a lot of the maintainers are struggling with that.
Yes.
They struggle with this idea of change. And so that's, it might be time for maintainers to take a back seat and let the builders build. And that's just the way it has to be.
I think that's a good point.
If you want to grow.
Yeah.
And that has far-reaching effects for our community, but we are a community and we are a collection of people at a lot of different levels. And so we're kind of in this ship together. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So
what's the old saying? Shoot for the stars, and if you miss, you'll still hit the moon.
Yep.
I mean, I still think that's a good way to look at this. I mean, clearly I'm a stakeholder here, business owner, children are here still. We're going to be here a long time. We want this community to thrive and to be the best it can. And I agree. You can't just stay in position, stay static. You can't. There's a name for that. It's called the Dead Sea. And I don't want that. I want to see us continue to lean in and grow and be innovative. And, whenever you're growing, there's going to be opposition and not that dissenting opinions are not valid. I think that, there's something to learn in some of those, but let's not let that come at the expense of the most important thing, which is progress.
I learned a couple of new words the other day. So you've probably always heard of the term cognitive dissonance, right? Okay. Well, I actually learned what that meant. And so I was like, cognitive dissonance. But one of the ones was metacognition. And that was a new word I'd learned. And it was about just certain people, the way their brain takes problems and breaks them apart and the way they learn to learn. And what came from that for me was that there are people that walk the earth that are constantly thinking of solutions and ideas. And then there are people that don't. And I was kind of shocked to know how many people don't have an internal dialogue. And this is like, Joey, this is a real estate podcast. Where are you going with this? I think there's a lot of people that are in roles of leadership that just honestly, and I don't mean this in a mean way, have no metacognition. They're not thinking ahead.
Yeah. Well, I would like to think that was probably more of the issue than just trying to protect what they have.
Yeah.
So, sometimes with decision-making and leadership roles, you're also sticking your neck out there and you're risking, your reputation and maybe in some cases your job on something, but don't let that get in the way of progress.
No.
You got to put it on the line once in a while.
And fear is a very powerful thing. And fear of making the wrong choice or fear of losing your position can make you stagnant and can really keep you from moving forward. And so hopefully fear will not win the day.
That's right. Well,
what did FDR say? The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
Isn't that the truth?
So, Josh, thank you so much, man. I'm looking forward to a great second half of May and headed into a nice warm summer.
It's coming.
And I'll see you in June.
Sounds good. Thank you, Joey.
Thank you, sir.
If you're enjoying the All Things Real Estate podcast, please feel free to subscribe, rate, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.